Discover the incredible moment a millionaire's life changed forever in an unexpected encounter. Brian Thompson, a self-made millionaire living among the glimmering skyscrapers of Chicago, never thought he'd feel this empty. 38 years old and the CEO of a booming tech startup, his days were filled with meetings and money, but nothing could replace the warmth of family and friends he had left behind. As fortune smiled upon him, the laughter of shared moments slipped away like sand through his fingers. In search of connection, he found himself back in his small Midwestern hometown, stepping into an annual festival etched in his childhood memories. The air was thick with the sweet scent of homemade pies and the sound of laughter, weaving through a tapestry of colors, balloons, and little kids racing for the pie-eating contest. Yet, despite the joyous atmosphere, Brian felt like an outsider, hovering on the periphery. Home, once familiar, felt foreign. He watched former classmates reflect on their modest lives, swapping stories of balancing bills with small triumphs, and he recognized their struggle, but it seemed worlds away from the luxuries he now lived. How had he let himself drift so far? In a fleeting moment, he caught a glimpse of Clara, a fierce, determined woman juggling 2 kids and a busy job at the local diner. The world couldn't dim the fire in her eyes. Their encounter over a shared lemonade sparked an unexpected connection. Brian was captivated as she shared her dreams, which felt so different, yet so relatable. Clara worked hard, attending night classes, to give her children the world she had once envisioned for herself. He heard her fears of eviction and the relentless march of bills, dreams momentarily buried beneath the weight of reality. It hit him like a punch to the gut. Here was someone truly living life, filled with resilience, while he had grown afraid to challenge himself, wrapped up in privilege. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the festival buzzed with excitement, Brian found himself anchored in this heartfelt conversation. With every word, a sense of duty pulled at him. He felt the urgency to help this incredible woman, torn between the life he built and the moral imperative clinging to him like a shadow. Just then, chaos erupted. A child's shrill cry pierced the festivities. Clara's youngest had collapsed, panic flooding her face. As sirens echoed in the distance, Brian frantically wrestled with his instincts, feeling the gravity of his new reality seat itself upon his shoulders. Standing at the crossroads, he looked at Clara's fear-tinged eyes, realizing that fortune meant nothing if he couldn't extend a hand to someone in need. Should he risk everything he built to help her? The echoes of his wealthy peers warned him of the consequences, yet the call for action was clearer than ever. In that charged moment, he was hit with clarity. True wealth was not in his bank account, but in the connections we forge, the community we uplift, and the love we share. Would he become the hero in this woman's story, or slip away like he had before? Brian's heart raced as he stared into Clara's panicked eyes. The laughter around them faded into a dull murmur, replaced by the rapid pounding of his pulse. Time seemed to slow. He had always been the one to solve problems, whether it was closing a major deal or steering his startup to success. But this was different. This was real life, raw and full of emotion. He took a step forward, instinctively reaching for Clara's arm, seeking somehow to reassure her even as his own anxiety spiked. "Stay here," he urged, even as his legs betrayed him, carrying him toward the chaos. The paramedics arrived in a flurry, already showing control amid the rising tide of fear. Brian's mind raced, trying to piece together what he could do. All the wealth in the world wouldn't help a child in need. He needed to act. The crowd parted as the paramedics knelt beside Clara's child, a beautiful little girl no older than 5. Brian could see the fight in Clara's features, her lips pressed tight, her fists clenched. He could almost feel the warmth of her small family embracing him even while standing on the sidelines, separated by the invisible barrier his financial success had erected. He returned to Clara, letting the sounds of the festival wash over him. "What can I do?" he asked, desperation spilling from his voice. Her glance held a flicker of surprise before she said, "Just be here. I need to know she'll be okay." That raw need pulled him closer. He hadn't been prepared for the depth of the bond forming through shared fear that he nodded, breathing deep to steady himself, wishing he were more than just a man of business. Then as quickly as the chaos had begun, calm enveloped the scene when the paramedics stabilized the child. They loaded her onto a stretcher, Clara's breath hitching as she leaned in, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Please be okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice barely above the noise. Brian felt a welling surge of hope for Clara and the little girl, realizing this was a pivotal moment in both of their lives. After the chaos subsided and Clara's daughter was safely on her way to the hospital, Clara turned to Brian, vulnerability etched across her face. Tears flowed freely now, as if all the weight she had carried came tumbling down. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she breathed, her voice trembling. "I was just doing what anyone would do," Brian replied, not quite believing the words he spoke. He watched as she wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, the reality crashing hard upon him. Here was a hardworking mother who created her own dreams against the churning tides of life, and he had simply thrown a lifeline when she needed it most. What was once a life filled with meaningless luxury now felt so empty compared to this connection that a new thought sparked in his mind. Maybe this place held more purpose for him than he had ever realized. Perhaps he could anchor himself to these roots, to this community, and maybe even begin to rebuild what had been lost as the festival resumed around them. He took a deep breath and decided then he would lend his skills and resources to Clara and others like her. It was time to engage not just in his own life, but to commit to rebuilding someone else's. "Clara," he said, a determined edge in his voice, "I want to help you. I'll do whatever it takes." She searched his eyes, the flicker of hope igniting within her. But what she didn't expect was how deeply this promise would intertwine their lives forever, leading Brian into a whirlwind of challenges he never thought he would face, and a journey that would change not just one, but many destinies. Clara's eyes widened, a mix of hope and disbelief flickering across her features. She seemed to search for clarity in the depths of his promise. "Really? You mean that?" Her voice caught like a rising tide, full of unrealized dreams and the pressing weight of uncertainty. "Yes," Brian affirmed, confidence swelling within him as he spoke. Just minutes ago, he felt lost in chaos, but now he felt a newfound resolve form in the fiery depths of his heart. "I want to help, not just with your daughter, but with everything." The crowd around them began to fade as the weight of the moment bonded them. For Brian, every experience of luxury now faded against this backdrop of fierce clarity. He could use his resources to build something more meaningful. It was time to look beyond the glossy facade of his life and into the raw, messy vitality of community. Clara wiped her tears away slowly, and for a moment, Brian felt a shift. It was like the air around them had been cleared, allowing clarity to seep in. But alongside that clarity came the sharp sting of her reality. "I don't even know how I'm going to pay the hospital bills." Just last week her words fell away, caught in the tumult of her emotions, the burden weighing heavy on her shoulders. "You don't have to think about that right now," Brian interrupted gently, stepping closer. "Let us focus on your daughter first. We'll figure the rest out together." Something in her softened at his words. Tentative trust began to take root, the kind he hadn't felt in a long while. "Together," she echoed softly, testing the rhythm of the word. They were both aware that together meant something vastly different than merely helping with bills. It meant forging a bond, a partnership that had the potential to change everything. As they surveyed the remains of the festival, children laughing, neighbors gathering strength, Brian felt a growing connection to this community. The laughter seemed louder now, more vibrant. Wrapped in complexity, it hummed with life. Every joy, every sorrow threaded together. He longed to be a part of it, not as an outsider looking in, but as a figure of support. "Would you consider sharing your story? Maybe we could organize something help others in need too?" he suggested. The idea bounced around, gaining energy and momentum in his mind. Fundraisers, outreach, maybe even community programs. Clara's eyes ignited with interest, an ember kindling into a flame. "You think people would care about what I have to say?" Her disbelief melted into intrigue. Absolutely. He believed it, and it felt as if this commitment would sharpen his purpose. "Your courage could encourage others." It might remind them they're not alone. He spoke with urgency, a barrier crashing down with each word he uttered. Okay, okay, Clara nodded, a sense of determination lighting up her face. Let us do it. As they allowed the weight of that decision to settle, Brian felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with uncertainty. What did doing it together really mean? And could they truly change lives, including their own? They stood on the cusp of something transformative, a journey that could redefine both their paths. But just as excitement twisted into anxiety, a sudden commotion arose at the edge of the festival. Brian glanced over, heart pounding again, aware that life could turn on a dime. Clara, stay close. He instinctively took her arm as shield and anchor. What new challenge would they face now? And would their resolve hold strong? As they moved towards the source of the disturbance, he felt the ground shift once more under their feet. Whatever awaited them, the bond they forged would be essential. But could they be ready for what lay ahead? The chaos at the festival made Brian's heart race. He tightened his grip on Clara's arm and pushed through the gathering crowd. The noise grew sharper, voices raised, panic thick in the air. What is happening? Clara's voice trembled as she scanned the scene around them, wide-eyed, her earlier determination wavering. I don't know, but let South stay close, Brian reassured her, leading them forward. They reached the edge of the crowd, where a small group had gathered. In the center, a young boy barely 10 was on his knees, sobbing uncontrollably, while a woman, presumably his mother, hovered protectively over him. Brian felt his pulse quicken. His instinct was to help, but he needed to gather more information. He caught snippets of conversation, words like lost and cell phone. This child had misplaced something valuable, something that seemed to shatter his world in that moment. With his heart in his throat, Brian approached cautiously, holding out his hands. What happened? We can help. The mother looked up at him, her face twisted in a mix of desperation and gratitude. He lost his phone and has pictures of his dad who passed away. They can't be replaced. Her voice cracked, and Clara moved closer to the boy, crouching down beside him. Hey there, she said softly, her compassion flowing as she reached out. I understand that it's really important to you. We'll find it, okay? The boy looked up at her, tears spilling down his cheeks, but she offered a sweet smile. Can you remember where you last saw it, sweetie? I was playing, and he stammered, sniffling. Brian felt the pang of empathy slice through him. He remembered how easy it was to overlook the small, meaningful moments in life, how often he brushed aside something he thought was trivial. But for this boy, it felt like the end of the world. Let us retrace your steps, Brian suggested. You showed your friends those cool pictures, right? Let us think about where you were playing. The boy nodded, and Brian ushered him gently to his feet. What began as misplaced panic turned into a mission. Clara drew in close, creating a united front. Together, the three of them moved away from the crowd. As they walked, Brian's mind spun with thoughts. He didn't realize this is what he needed, this genuine connection, this shared purpose. His life had been defined by money and status, the weight of expectation pressing down. Yet here he was, squatting in the grass, searching for a child's lost treasure amidst the festival remnants, feeling every heartbeat resonate with something deeper. Clara glanced over at him, her eyes sparkling with admiration. I didn't know you could be so caring. There was warmth in her voice that made Brian's chest swell. Maybe you're the one showing me how, he replied, the words tumbling out effortlessly. There was magic in that moment, a fragile yet beautiful bond forged between them as they focused on something greater than themselves. Suddenly, the boy stopped. There, he shouted, pointing towards the playground area just ahead. His eyes lit up, pooling with renewed hope. Brian and Clara hastened their pace, their hearts racing in tandem with the boy's. That what happened next felt surreal. The energy shifted dramatically. Other children laughed and played, blissfully unaware of the heartaches surrounding them. But here, in this moment of chaos and uncertainty, Brian realized something felt more potent than fear. It felt like hope. As they closed in on the playground, Brian noticed something glinting in the sunlight, an object half buried in the sand. Is that it? Clara asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. Yes, yes. The boy nearly jumped, bouncing on his feet as if the weight of the world no longer sat upon his shoulders. Brian rushed over, digging through the sand. His heart thundered in his chest, but there was no fear, or hesitation now. Just a sense of purpose. As he unearthed the phone, a surge of exhilaration sparked within him. Perhaps this was the change he had been searching for. Just as he turned back, phone in hand, the air suddenly crackled with tension again. "Hey!" Shadow loomed behind him, and Brian sensed something shifting in the crowd. They were no longer just watching. What had he stirred? What new challenge was emerging as he turned to face it? Brian turned, his heart pounding. What had once felt like a simple act of kindness now seemed to morph into something more menacing. The crowd had parted slightly, revealing a tall figure in a black jacket, his face obscured beneath a cap. A light breeze rustled through the festival banners, creating an eerie tension that hummed in the air. "Hey, you!" The figure stepped forward, voice low and commanding. Brian instinctively took a step back, clutching the phone tightly. Clara instinctively moved closer to Brian, her body speaking of apprehension. "What do you want?" Brian asked, keeping his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline rushing through him. The man's gaze flickered to the boy, then back to Brian. "You're holding something that doesn't belong to you," he said, a smirk dancing on his lips, but his eyes held a threat. "It belongs to him," Clara exclaimed, pointing at the boy who stood quaking, unsure of what to do. "He lost it, and we helped him find it." The figure scoffed, his posture imposing. "Kids lose things all the time. What makes this one special?" Brian's chest tightened. The shadows of wealth and status, the expectations he'd spent years shedding, loomed back into the forefront of his mind. He'd seen the ruthless side of life, but this was different. He felt an urge to protect not just the phone, but the innocence of this child and the bond he had discovered with Clara. "It's special to him," Brian said firmly, stepping forward, confronting the man. "It has pictures of his dad. Trust me, those can't be replaced. You can't understand what it means to him." The man's demeanor shifted ever so slightly, but he didn't back down. "You need to learn your place. You think playing hero is going to make things better?" His voice dripped with disdain. "No," Brian replied, his heart racing. "Doing the right thing is." The boy's tears glistened with unspoken fears, and Clara's hand closed around Brian's arm, grounding him. There was power in their unity, a silent promise that they wouldn't back down. No one should intimidate them for an act of compassion. Then, as if sensing the brewing storm, more festival-goers began to turn their heads. Whispers started, murmurs of disbelief spreading like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know what was happening. Brian caught sight of a couple of parents who had also gathered, and their frowns mirrored his own unease. "Just walk away," the figure growled, glancing around as the spectators began to close in. "You don't want to mess with me." "We're not afraid of you," Clara said, her voice steady despite the quiver beneath. "What you're doing is wrong." The crowd's tension began to morph into something more powerful. Some people stepped closer, emboldened by the courage radiating from Brian and Clara. The festival, once a whirlwind of sounds and colors, transformed into a communal force pulling together. In that moment, Brian felt a shift inside. He realized how important it was to stand tall for someone else, to reclaim a narrative of hope instead of fear. His hand tightened around the phone, turning it into a symbol of their defiance. "What if we all just stand together?" he suggested, looking at the crowd gathering behind him. He could feel the energy rising, an undercurrent of support building from those witnessing the scene unfold. Just then, a woman from the crowd spoke up. "Yes, right. It's just a phone, but it carries something much more." A ripple of agreement echoed through the crowd, and Brian found strength in the collective energy surrounding him. The figure in the black jacket tensed, losing the confidence he once exhibited. "Back off," he shouted, but his voice lacked conviction, and Brian saw doubt creep into the man's expression. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Clara and the boy, Brian felt a rush of clarity. Hope didn't just surface when everything was easy. It thrived in moments like this, challenging, raw, and courageous. But just as the figure appeared ready to turn and leave, another man stepped forward from the dense crowd, someone Brian recognized. The tension built, and as he took the first step forward, Brian's mind raced with uncertainty. What could this mean? Who was he? And how would his presence tilt the scales? What is about to happen next? Brian pondered as eyes focused, and the air became charged with expectation. The crowd parted quietly as the newcomer emerged. Brian squinted, heart pounding louder than before. It was Mr. Sullivan, a local businessman, known for his generosity, but also his unyielding demeanor. His presence stirred a mixture of hope and dread within Brian. Could this be the turning point? Or would it make the situation worse? Enough of this nonsense, Mr. Sullivan's deep voice boomed. His piercing gaze swept over the figure in the black jacket, taking in the hostile aura. What are you doing here? The man shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. This doesn't concern you, Sullivan, he retorted, but there was a stammer in his words. It does concern me, Mr. Sullivan replied coolly, glancing toward Brian and Clara. I see you making a scene over something that should never have been an issue in the first place. His gaze hardened as he focused back on the imposing figure. You're threatening a child. The murmur that fluttered through the crowd gave Brian hope. Perhaps Mr. Sullivan's authority would turn the tide. Clara's grip on his arm tightened, her uncertainty now mixed with anticipation. Just walk away, the man hissed again, attempting to regain control, but this time his confidence had cracked. You don't know who you're dealing with. Maybe you don't know who you're dealing with either, Mr. Sullivan shot back, taking a step closer. The tension in the air felt electric, each heartbeat resonating louder than the last. Look around. This isn't just about you or the phone. It's about respect, about compassion. That's something money can't buy. The large group behind Brian took a collective breath, their posture shifting toward Mr. Sullivan as if drawing strength from his words. He glanced at the boy, who still stood trembling but visibly reassured by the presence of the adults rallying around him. Mr. Sullivan, Brian found his voice, surprising himself. It's not just a phone. It holds memories for this kid. Memories of his dad. Mr. Sullivan nodded slowly, absorbing Brian's plea, his expression softening as he considered the gravity of the situation. I understand, he said gently, and everyone here knows what it means to stand up for one another. We can't let fear dictate our actions. A murmur rippled through the crowd of agreement, voices overlapping in a chorus of support, even as the man in the black jacket seethed with frustration. Get out of here before this escalates, Mr. Sullivan warned, his tone leaving no room for argument. The man's eyes darted around at the encroaching crowd, sensing the turn of support and the recognition of unity. Brian could almost see the man wrestling between pride and retreat. After a moment that felt like an eternity, he spat, "You'll regret this," and stepped back, blending into the crowd as deflated whispers followed him. That a wave of relief washed over Brian. The boy melted into tears of gratitude, and Clara beamed, her bravery igniting a spark in everyone around them. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, Brian breathed, the weight of the moment sinking in. The businessman smiled, a warmth breaking through his stern exterior. Just doing what's right, he replied, turning to the boy. And you, young man, should never feel ashamed to hold onto your memories. They matter. As the crowd dispersed, conversations erupted, the festival's earlier vibrancy returning, revitalized by the courageous stand. Brian exchanged looks with Clara, both of them buoyed by the hard-won victory. But as the essence of community wrapped around them, a chilling breeze swept past. A shadow lingered at the edge of the crowd, waiting. What would happen next? And who might return to unsettle the peace they fought for? Brian smiled at Clara, the thrill of the moment still buzzing in his veins. Mr. Sullivan's words echoed in his mind, a reminder of the strength found in community. They turned to leave, already imagining the stories they would share about today. But the air shifted again, heavy with a sense of foreboding. As the festivities resumed, the children's laughter filled the air, and the sweet smell of cotton candy swirled around them. Yet, Brian couldn't shake the weight creeping back into his heart. He glanced back over his shoulder, scanning the edges of the crowd. The man in the black jacket had vanished, but something told him this wasn't the end. Hey, Clara said, nudging him gently. You good? Yeah, just thinking, he replied, somewhat distracted. Do you think he'll come back? Who cares? Clara huffed, her spirit momentarily dimmed. We showed him. That's all that matters. It matters, Brian insisted, biting his lip as they walked towards the food stalls. It just doesn't feel over. Not yet. With every step, they passed familiar faces, friends, parents, community members. The festival had reignited their sense of belonging. Yet, in the back of his mind, Brian remained vigilant. People wandered without a care, blissfully enjoying their lives. But the tension between safety and danger hung in the air like an uninvited guest. "Let us grab something to eat," Clara suggested, plucking a caramel apple from a nearby stand. "I need some sugar to celebrate our little victory." She flashed him a playful smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. He nodded, pushing aside his worry. As they shared a moment, a deep voice interrupted. "Brian, Clara." It was Mr. Sullivan, approaching them with quick strides. "Everything okay?" Clara asked, concern visible in her tone. "Please tell me there's no more trouble," Mr. Sullivan replied, a hint of urgency in his voice. "No, no trouble," Brian answered. "But, the guy in the black jacket? I don't think we've heard the last of him." Mr. Sullivan's expression darkened. "He's a troublemaker. This town has seen its share of them. But you did the right thing today, standing up for what's right." He took a breath, as if weighing a heavy decision. "Still, I want you both to be careful. If he comes back, let someone know. Don't take chances." "Sure," Brian replied, the reality of the situation weighing heavier at Mr. Sullivan's words. "Now, how about I treat you both to some snacks?" Mr. Sullivan offered, his tone softening. "You earned it." They accepted, reluctantly shoving their concerns aside, if only for a moment. As they ate, laughter flowed easily, but Brian noticed Mr. Sullivan's eyes flicker to the crowd every few seconds. Was he watching for the man? Or was it something else, a deeper unease lingering behind his calm facade? The cool evening turned into twilight, and the festival lights twinkled warmly against the darkening sky. But as Clara laughed and shared stories of the earlier chaos, Brian's eyes darted over the milling crowd, scanning for any hint of dark clothing. Suddenly, a shout erupted from the entrance of the festival grounds. The crowd's focus shifted, murmurings filled the air. "Is that him?" Brian whispered, pointing with a shaky finger. There, just beyond the edges of the celebration, the figure in the black jacket loomed, a sinister smirk plastered across his face. Brian felt his heart race, fear and adrenaline rushing through him. What would happen now? Would they stand together again? Or would this be the showdown that changed everything? Brian's heart thundered in his chest as he locked eyes with the figure in the black jacket. Time seemed to freeze, the laughter and merriment of the festival fading into an unsettling silence around him. The smirk on the man's face sent a chill down his spine. It felt like a warning. "What do we do?" Clara whispered, her earlier energy evaporating. "Stay close to me," he replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Let us find Mr. Sullivan." Navigating through the crowd felt like swimming against a current. People jostled against them, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Brian tried to push the image of the man's grin out of his mind, but it lingered, dark and foreboding. Finally, they spotted Mr. Sullivan near the game's booth, talking animatedly with a couple of parents. Brian rushed over, urgency in every step. "Mr. Sullivan, the man in the black jacket is back." Mr. Sullivan's expression shifted immediately from friendly to grave. "Where?" "Over there, by the entrance," Clara pointed, her voice shaky. Mr. Sullivan's demeanor changed. He scanned the crowd, his eyes sharp and focused. "You two stay right here," he ordered, but there was a thunderstorm brewing behind his calm facade. It reminded Brian of how a warm summer day could suddenly become fierce and chaotic. As Mr. Sullivan moved closer to the entrance, Brian's anxiety soared. The laughter that surrounded him now felt distant and hollow. "What if he comes here?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He won't," Brian insisted, though he wasn't sure. He watched Mr. Sullivan confront the man. There was tension in the air. It crackled like static electricity. "I'm going to check on them," Brian said suddenly, adrenaline pushing his feet forward before he fully thought it through. Clara caught his arm. "Wait, Brian." What if he shook her hand off gently, willing himself to be brave? "I have to know." As he crept toward the entrance, he could see the two men locked in a silent standoff. Mr. Sullivan's body was tense, like a coiled spring ready to burst. The man in the black jacket, however, exuded a sense of casual menace, leaning slightly as if he owned the very ground they stood on. Brian's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't hear their words, but the body language spoke volumes. Mr. Sullivan stood tall, challenging, while the man's smirk faded into something more dangerous. Brian took a step closer, against his better judgment. "Stay back," Clara called out. but he couldn't hear her. The need to protect those around him surged. Suddenly, the man pointed toward them, a sudden wave of recognition washing over his face. "You're the kid who stood up to me. I'm not done yet," he said, his voice cutting through the din of the festival. Brian's stomach dropped. The man's words felt like a threat wrapped in a promise. "What do you want?" Mr. Sullivan said, stepping forward, a wall of defiance between Brian and impending chaos. "Just a little conversation. It's time for him to learn some respect," the man said, his eyes flickering back to Brian. Fear coursed through Brian as he instinctively stepped back. Clara was right behind him, panic evident on her face. "What now?" she asked, eyes wide. Before Brian could answer, Mr. Sullivan's voice rang out, firm and unwavering. "You need to leave. We won't tolerate your harassment here." The man's face twisted into a snarl, and just like that, the air shifted again, thickening with uncertainty. Brian felt his heart pounding in his chest like a drum, drowning out the music of the festival, the laughter, and the joy. How far would this man go? What was at stake for them? Just then, the crowd began to notice the tension. Whispers spread like wildfire. The bright lights suddenly felt ominous, the festive atmosphere evaporating into something colder. As Brian turned to grab Clara's hand, he felt a sense of urgency creeping over him. This was far from over. But as the figure took a menacing step closer, Brian's mind raced. The question remained, how would they turn the tide now? And deep down, in that moment, a troubling thought settled in. What if this was only the beginning? The tension wrapped around Brian like a thick fog, blurring the laughter and colors of the festival into a gloomy haze. He could feel the eyes of the crowd darting between the three men, uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. Clara's fingers clutched his arm, her grip a mix of fear and solidarity. "What does he want with you?" Clara breathed, her eyes wide, searching his for reassurance that he couldn't provide. "I don't know," Brian replied, his voice barely a murmur. He absorbed the scene, a furious Mr. Sullivan facing off against a simmering threat. It was as if the festival had become a stage, and they were all spectators to a drama no one wanted to witness. Suddenly, the man in the black jacket took a step forward, hands tucked in his pockets, an embodiment of menace cloaked in nonchalance. "You think you can protect him?" he sneered, sneaking a glance over at Brian, a glint of malice in his eyes. "What do you think will happen if you keep sticking your nose where it doesn't belong?" The crowd began to murmur, a wave of whispers swarming around them, fueled by fear and curiosity. Brian noticed a few faces turned toward Mr. Sullivan, looking for leadership in this unsettling moment. "Just leave," Mr. Sullivan growled, his voice steady but strained. "This isn't the place for your games." For a heartbeat, Brian thought he saw hesitation in the man's stance, but it vanished as quickly as it arrived. With a mocking laugh, the figure leaned closer to Brian, the stench of danger clouding the air. "And what are you going to do if I don't?" He taunted. It was a dare, a brutal challenge that twisted Brian's insides. He felt his heart race, a mix of fear and defiance surging through him. Everything he had ever stood for, the very essence of who he was screaming inside him to take action. But what could he do? He was just a kid, and here stood a man who thrived on intimidation. "Don't," his voice cracked, but he forged ahead. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm not afraid of you." Mr. Sullivan turned sharply toward him, surprise flashing across his features. But there was something else there, as well, pride mingled with concern. "Brian, stay back," he warned, eyes laser-focused. But Brian didn't move. That twinge of fear had transformed into a seed of courage. If he could speak up here, maybe others would find their voices too. The crowd was still gathering, a silent army waiting for a beacon. "Is this how you get your kicks?" Brian spat, channeling everything inside him into that one moment. "Bullying someone just because you can?" The man's expression hardened, brows furrowing as confusion rippled through him. "You think you know what it's like?" "I know enough," Brian shot back, a fire igniting in his chest. "I know more than you think." Just as the man opened his mouth to respond, the atmosphere shifted again. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Leave him alone. You don't belong here." Her anger was infectious, sparking others to echo her words, standing together in unexpected solidarity. The man recoiled, startled. Anger danced across his features, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He took a step back, weighed down by the sudden collective energy of the crowd that had rallied to Brian's side. "Maybe you should go," another voice chimed in, emboldened by the growing movement against the threat. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." The man laughed, but it was strained, twisting into something ugly. "You think this is over? You're all going to regret this," he hissed, turning away, but not before throwing Brian one last sinister glare. The air was thick with a mix of relief and confusion as the crowd began to disperse, tension slowly unraveling. But the danger was far from over. Brian could still feel the weight of that gaze lingering on him, a shadow over their small victory. "What do we do now?" Clara's voice trembled beside him. "I don't know," Brian admitted, feeling the ground shift under his feet. But deep down, he realized everything was about to change. It was more than just a moment. It was a warning sign of something bigger lurking just beneath the surface. As Clara looked at him, her eyes searching, it hit him. This was only the beginning. Their small town would never be the same again. And he couldn't shake the feeling that the man in the black jacket was still out there, waiting to make his next move. "Let us just keep an eye out," Brian finally said, but the sense of foreboding weighed heavily in his gut. What awaited them was the real question. Brian felt a resolve building inside him as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the festival. The world around them, filled with laughter and joy, attracted a sense of normalcy that felt increasingly fragile. Clara's hand brushed against his, a warm reminder of their shared experience, a lifeline amid uncertainty. The crowd was beginning to disperse, with snippets of excited conversations echoing around them. Yet, Brian's heart raced, the confrontation with the man in the black jacket replaying in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness that loomed over their community wasn't finished. "Let us not let him ruin this," Clara said, her voice offering a soothing balm to Brian's frayed nerves. As their eyes met, a spark ignited between them. "We stood up for each other today," she added, her tone softening moments of fear, breathing fresh life into the aftermath of that confrontation. "You're right. We've taken a stand," Brian replied, realizing the truth in her words. More than just a phone, more than just a moment of courage, this was a glimpse into what they could accomplish together. With newfound conviction, he looked out at the festival, picturing the bond with the people around them growing stronger. He owed it to Clara and the boy and everyone who shared in moments of vulnerability and courage to keep pushing against the weight of fear. "Let's keep this momentum going," he proposed, watching Clara's expression transform from uncertainty to determination. "What if we started organizing something more permanent? A community group that helps those in need, raises awareness, supports each other?" Her eyes lit up. "Yes, we could create a network, something to rally around." Clara's enthusiasm made Brian smile. They were already shifting from being mere spectators to key players in their community's transformation. As they discussed logistics, the types of events they could hold, and the issues they could tackle, more people began to gather. Parents from the festival, vendors, and even those who had witnessed the earlier confrontation drifted closer, eager to be part of the conversation. "Are you guys ready to do something amazing for this town?" someone shouted, raising a fist in solidarity. Brian felt energy ripple through the growing crowd, setting off a wave of excitement. Hopes and dreams were rising together, tangible and real. He glanced at Clara beside him, her face radiant. They were leading something profound, and in that moment, he realized this was not just about the community, it was healing for them both. Their voices united, filling the air with commitment and vision. The festival came alive again, not only with laughter but with a fierce determination to foster connection and rebuild what had been lost. "Together, we can stand against the darkness," Clara said, eyes shining. "Together, we're stronger." Cheers erupted, echoing their shared conviction. They mapped out plans for a fundraiser, programs to build relationships, and outreach efforts to ensure no one felt lost or alone. As twilight deepened, Brian grasped Clara's hand tightly, feeling the warmth coursing through them, a promise forged in the face of adversity. The festival might have been their temporary escape, but the journey ahead was vital. This was a beginning, not just for the town but also for them, a purpose ignited, hearts intertwined. But just then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a familiar figure lingering near the festival's exit. The man in the black jacket stood there, watching, a dark cloud against the colorful backdrop. Fear threatened to engulf him again. Yet Brian took a deep breath and turned back to the gathering crowd, standing shoulder to shoulder with Clara. Hadn't they just determined to face challenges, to not let panic win? As the moonlight illuminated their hopeful faces, Brian felt a wave of unshakable determination. They could meet this darkness head-on, armed with the love and support of their community. Whatever lay ahead, he knew they had the courage to confront it together. "Now is our moment," Brian declared, raising his voice to the crowd. "Let us show this town what it means to rise together." Cheers erupted, and the air buzzed with the sound of hope and determination. In that instant, the shadows of the past faded just a bit, replaced by the radiant light of the future they were building, bold, united, and unyielding. The urgency still flickered beneath the surface, but Brian stood strong, surrounded by a community that dared to dream and fight for something greater. Together, they would reclaim the narrative. Together, they were unstoppable as the night wore on. The festival illuminated the path ahead, their new beginning uncoiled like a vibrant thread, weaving together lives filled with resilience and love. And as Brian looked at Clara, her smile brighter than ever, he knew this was the moment that would define their paths. Not just for them, but the entire town. Don't wait. This is your moment. Subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories like this one that will shape lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let others know you believe in the power of community. Comment below with your thoughts and feelings about this epic ending. We want to hear from you. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible transformation. True fans, now is the time to show your support and spread the message. Let's rise together.